One.
So now that we've begun, or at least opened the subject of the notion of what a profession is, and I've made the claim that this is a class in professional ethics, we can certainly ask the question whether engineering is a profession. Well, again, there's not really nothing official about the notion of profession. It's a cultural artifact. Along the way, people found it useful to characterize certain jobs as professions, and there were reasons for that. And there are historical reasons, but there's no law. There's no official profession law or something. It is a changing historical category, and in the 20th century, engineering, along with other jobs, sort of made its pitch to be a profession. Other jobs that have been granted here and there the status of profession are social work and library science, actually. Oftentimes, people think of teaching as a profession, and in some ways it qualifies. I do not consider myself a professional in the sense that an engineer is a professional or a lawyer is a professional. I simply don't share it, but I think teaching does have some aspects of profession. Well, if we ask, though, whether engineering is a profession, basically we're asking whether in some way it resembles these other things, and especially in this notion of the relationship, as we'll see in one of the first readings by Sieghart. His whole idea of professional ethics is embedded or is an outcome of this relationship. So we can save some of this discussion for our discussion of Sieghart's professions as the conscience of society. But in some way or another, we would have to say that engineering does something similar or has similar status as what these so-called professions do. In some ways, it's kind of obvious that engineers are at least as important as these other people. And that is because of their particular knowledge, mastery of, or special skills concerning technology. If we think about what these relationships mean, the professional here has, because of what they've taken on with regard to their patient, client, parishioner, has a lot of responsibility. That is, a doctor, if the 7-Eleven cashier shows up drunk for work and enters the things wrong, life will go on, and no one is going to get hurt too much. But if the doctor shows up drunk for a surgery, if a lawyer shows up drunk for a trial, or if you're being counseled on the state of your soul by a drunken priest, then they can do a lot of damage. So one is an old Team Fortress 2. Sorry to mention Team Fortress 2. Cliche. One of the characters, the sniper, is a professional with standards, right? Probably none of you have played Team Fortress 2 and know what I'm talking about, but it'd be funny if you did. But a professional has to have standards of conduct, and drunkenness is just one thing. You're not supposed to be drunk at work, right? But it means a lot more if you're drunk as a doctor at work than if you're drunk as a postal worker at work. And believe me, I have a lot of respect for postal workers. My father was one for 30 years. But so the notion is, in some ways, engineering is kind of obviously a profession because engineers create, design, maintain, build technology, and technology is important. Not just because when technology goes wrong, people can be harmed and killed, but technology has a huge impact on people's quality of life. So one could say that engineering is really an ideal candidate for a profession along the lines of the traditionally accepted ones, in the sense that it deals with an area of life which is considered to be so important that it can be set off, and the practitioner of the profession has a higher degree of moral responsibility than your average worker, and so has to be held to, I hate to say it, a higher ethical standard. Now, what that means, we'll be exploring, but that's the general idea. You'll see that in Sieghart, he sees it in terms of altruism versus selfishness, that in a lot of jobs, it's okay to be selfish. in business, for instance, whereas his whole idea of the professions is that they are entirely altruistic. Now, that may go a little too far, and there have been generations of engineering students at Drexel who, in my classes, who read that essay and thought that he goes too far, but it's at least worth considering. But at the very least, the very notion of a profession, it can't just be technical skill. It can't just be the amount of learning that you need to have, because let's face it, there's all sorts of, being a being a physicist takes a lot of skill, at least as much learning and study as being an engineer, probably more, right? Being a, a professional chess player takes a huge amount of study. But chess is not a profession, although in some ways it mimics a profession. But what these things lack is this notion of what they do is it has this impact, this direct impact on people's lives, the doing of it. So in some ways, engineering is just a natural for being called a profession. In other ways, it's not. Look at these, and this is something that will come up throughout the course, so this won't be the only time I say it, but look at these traditional relationships having to do with doctors, lawyers, and clergy people. They're intimate, direct, individual relationships. The doctor puts his or her hands on the patient. The lawyer rummages around the property or looks into the case of a particular client. The priest or the rabbi is talking to a particular parishioner or member of the religious community. However, although engineers have clients and they have the same, you'll see, and when you read the codes of ethics, that they have duties to their clients as professionals. They have this double relationship, which makes engineering ethics really both more interesting, I think, than other forms of professional ethics, and really more questionable because of this double relationship, because the engineer has this double relationship, the relationship to the client who's actually paying the bills, but also a relationship to the public, which basically means the world. You build a piece of technology, you're doing a job for somebody, and you're supposed to do it well, and you have all these duties to them as a professional. But if you look at the NSP Code of Ethics, which we will, the famous first canon, the whole paramount canon, you'll see that the most important, this is the most important idea in engineering ethics. This is the most famous and important principle in any code of ethics for engineers. So what engineers are told to do is to hold paramount or put first the health, safety, and welfare of the public. And that would mean to put that above the wishes or even well-being of their own client. There's nothing in medicine, law, or the clergy that's really similar to that, I think. That duality or that ambiguity and really division, as we'll see, it can be an outright conflict sometimes. What the engineer is doing for their client is a job, and it's important to people's businesses or their doing personal services for individuals. But what really makes engineering a profession is not that relationship, that engineer-client relationship, which is really pretty pedestrian in my view. In the sense that it's similar to all sorts of other business relationships. What is special about engineering and what gives it, I think, a status of a profession, although that is certainly something we can question, is this relationship with the public. You say you build a shopping mall or you design a structure for a client who's a commercial client. If it's not a good structure, it affects their business. But if it's an unsafe structure, it affects people's lives and health. So your first duty is to make it safe for them rather than make it profitable for this person. So I may do one more video where we work this out a little bit. But I think engineering is a profession, but it's not an easily understood profession. As we'll see, there are some contradictions and tensions within engineering, I think, the nature of engineering, which make it not a simple matter. how it's a profession.